Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do that with Fleet Logistics International. The well-known fleet management company has added a clear sustainability and even a mobility layer in its portfolio. And today, Samuel Kellner-Steinmetz, he is the CSO, and Thibaut Allain, he is Head of Global Mobility Solutions, will share their expert do's and don'ts in fleet electrification and the relevant actions to take. Gentlemen, welcome to Brussels. You can join me on stage. There are some microphones. That one is working. Probably that one as well. Okay.
Since we've all been working on Teams for so long, so we do the normal thing of, do you hear me? Can you see me? Okay, all good.
Thank you very much. You can hear me too? Yes, now it works. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak in this interesting setup. Thought leadership is all about learning and thinking about things that are not so obvious. And I think that's what we want to talk about today. I would like to start with a story that many of you may know or may have heard about. So you see an ice bear there. Think about it like this. A CEO of a very big company is on a trip to the north. I don't know, management meeting, whatever. And he sees that there is a real change in climate. Obviously, that's a problem. Being all interested into that topic, he comes back and communicates to all the media, yes, we will reduce our carbon footprint. We will decarbonize our company, and we will do this. Big applause, everybody, yeah, this is great, let's do this. CEO comes back into the company, sits down with, of course, many of his managers, but also with the fleet manager, and says, by the way, your goal is to reduce the CO2 level of our whole fleet by 50% by the year X and completely until 2030. Now, that's really what's happening, right? That's what we see all over. But then the question is, how will this really work? Can this be done? If you look into the media, it looks like it's simple, right? We've got electric cars, we'll just buy them, use them, everything's clear. But there are so many little details that need to be considered. When I think about decarbonization, it reminds me of something that I don't have a very good experience with. It has to do with a diet. Ever heard of a low-carb diet? Carbonization, low carbs. I have tried it. Didn't work so well for me, but the thing is, there are some similarities. When you start a low-carb diet, obviously you're going to leave something away. You're going to leave away all the stuff that has carbonization. And the questions that come up then is, well, what am I going to eat instead now? Where will I get this stuff? And is it wholesome? Is the stuff I'm getting even wholesome? These very same questions should be the questions we should be thinking about when we think about decarbonization. Because we don't want to have a yo-yo effect. We want this to really work. As Fleet Logistics, we are in our daily business advising our customers. We're consulting with them, and we've been doing this for many years now. And there are some really interesting success factors we have seen. It's those little things, those things that are not so obvious at first that you really have to think about when following such a decarbonization strategy.
Thank you, Samuel. And indeed, what we will present are 7 of those key success factors that we've seen over the years across Europe, working with our consultancy teams, and that's what we will look at. The first thing is this, is framing green. What do we mean with that is you have to define for your organization what green actually means. Because, as on the picture, you have many different shades of green. Questions are, for instance, okay, we will be carbon neutral by 2030, but does that include, obviously, all vehicles, only benefit cars? Do we add tool cars in there? Do we add light commercial vehicles in there? What about carbon offsetting? Does that count in our carbon neutrality goal? There are many, many of those questions that ultimately will influence, of course, the setup, the model that you will implement, the car policy that will go with it. and ultimately as well the measurements that will be necessary afterwards to actually prove how far you are from the goal year after year. And that control aspect means that you have to define, of course, also the way that you look at it. Is it just based on the CO2 values in average of your fleet? Do you include in there only fossil fuels? Do you go really for the whole thing, well to wheel, including, actually electricity production also has a CO2 element, manufacturing of those. Many of those things you have to actually define up front to be able to measure it in the right way afterwards. And control is what this is about.
Thank you, exactly. Control is also the next point, the next major point we want to talk about. The operational complexity of electric mobility is clear. I think we're speaking here to experts. You know all about this, right? Charging infrastructure. What about the benefit in kind? In which countries? What is the tax situation in general in certain areas? These are such complex topics that are ever changing, right? It feels like every day I read the news, oh, there's a new law coming up that will change something here. Now it's 60 kilometers that a PHEV has to go to get a certain refund or a certain benefit, and it's not 40 anymore. But this is changing so quickly. What is the effect of that? Well, that complexity is really difficult to manage, because you may have set up a clear understanding, this is what green fleet means for us. You're ready to go, you get started, and all of a sudden something changes and you're stuck. And your car park is all of a sudden half empty because the cars cannot be used the way they should be, or the mobility cannot be used the way it should be done. I think this is where a partner is also very important. A partner that can manage such complexity. Somebody who's an expert to help you there. And by the way, that is something Fleet Logistics is quite good at.
Yeah, and in talking about complexity, the other thing, of course, that is of importance is when we talk about electrification, it's about adding a number of vendors to your setup. Think about charging. And that complexity is also natural, because what we do recommend to do is what you're doing basically today is shopping, is knowing, okay, what are the latest service offerings by which partners in which countries? Actually, behind the scenes, do they work with the same partners or not? How does that evolve over time? And that is a very important thing, because the last thing you want to have is full dependability on a very restricted number of suppliers that may have evolved in a different direction or may not have evolved versus others. So that's a key aspect, shopping, inquiring.
Exactly. My wife loves shopping, by the way. So the next point we'd like to talk about is change. Now, as you see, this guy here obviously has a certain mindset about something. Something we have seen is that there's a real shift from pure procurement in terms of fleet towards human resources. So the way the users are seeing their benefits of having a car or even having mobility is becoming more and more important. Now, obviously, there needs to be a change happening in the mind. Why are people sometimes hesitant to go for electric mobility, or to go maybe even for a completely different solution, like a mobility budget or something else like that? And I think it's the rationale that needs to be worked on. People need to understand the benefits, why something should be changed, and how things can be changed. And doing this is something we see with our customers to be one of the most challenging things to be done. As such, we have created together with our customers, for example, a tool that will help to do this. Because telling your employees that they have to use a certain mode of, let's say, electrification is the one thing, but making them actually use it and making the right choice is another one. Now, how can you do this? Of course, you could force them, right? You could say, look, this is the new policy. You can choose from these 5 electric models, and that's it. But what will be the result? Some of them will be happy about it and think that's a great thing, but many of them will not understand and want to do this. So what we've learned is it's important to take them by the hand and give them a very simple and easy solution to work it out. The perfect fit that we found is actually a solution where you have a car configurator that can be filled up or can be programmed due to your car policy, so you decide what policy should be in this car configurator, which will then allow only a certain choice of vehicles. But that's not the whole story. The story starts sooner. This very car configurator has a set of questions that will help the driver to understand, am I actually capable of having an electric car? It will also help them to understand that there are maybe some other solutions. But most important, it will also tell the tool that this specific driver should maybe have only a limited choice of cars, because this person shouldn't have the choice to go for a plug-in hybrid, or shouldn't have the choice to go for a diesel, or should have the choice to go for an electric vehicle, or even not have the choice to go for an electric vehicle because it doesn't make any sense for this person. So to combine this all in one tool is something that really will help to bring all these minds together, create a certain rationale to understand why it makes sense to have a certain choice of vehicles, and then execute that. That's something we have created and we have developed because we have seen the demand with the customers, and we see it to work very, very well.
Yeah. We talked about the rational aspect, but of course we all know that even with the best tools, the best car policies, the most beautiful electric cars in the car list, that won't be enough, because a tool can be tricked, a person can answer in a certain direction, and this is what we mentioned here. It's also about the big picture. A person may only see the top of the iceberg, a new car list and a couple of questions to be answered into a configurator, for instance. But it's important for them to understand, of course, the big picture. And again, this is one of the things that we have seen over the years, that the most successful stories start with a really holistic view on that change. And triggering really the curiosity of people is an important aspect of it. We're talking about change management, about inspiring people, and not only driving a certain choice because of tax benefits, either for the company and or the employee. So an important point is indeed to inspire as part of a change management process.
Exactly. The next part we want to talk about is this one. Now, this may be a very obvious one, I understand. You know, when we talk about accepting electric mobility, we all know it will not work for all. But isn't it true when we think about, okay, our target is 2030 to be fully electric, then we think, oh, by the way, every single one of our drivers should be that left picture here, right? Your own property with direct access to electricity, and in a perfect world, even produced in an eco-friendly way, home. I mean, that would be perfect. And in a way, that's the first way how I picture it. Oh, this is the future, this is great. In 2030, everything will be running like this, it's perfect, we don't need to have atomic plants, and you know what. This would be so fantastic. But let's face the truth. How many of our potential users of electric cars really have that perfect setup? Because those will probably already now be ordering electric cars, already drive them. But we do have a great deal of employees that do not have that perfect setup. Now, of course, this is an exaggeration, although I would like to spend my holidays there maybe sometime. But obviously, there are some situations where it doesn't make sense to have an electrification. Or maybe it looks like it doesn't make sense. What we also have to do, and that's something we have experienced, we have to think out of the box. Just because a specific situation looks like it's not working, doesn't mean it's not working at all. You know, 2 years ago, if somebody would have told me, if I don't have a chance to have a wall box at home and I cannot charge at work, there's no way that I could use an electric car. Well, guess what? Nowadays, you have a solution maybe like a smart cable. You can plug it into a normal electricity socket, and it's super simple, and it works. Did I know about this 2 or 3 years ago? Exactly, no, not really, but now it's there. So I think we have to think about this, and to adjust is the point. Just because things are not perfect yet doesn't mean that they cannot change. And there are really good solutions. And I think that's also an important point where you sometimes really do need to have a good partner to help you and keep you up to date. What are the options? Because as I said in the beginning, there is a change going on all the time. All the time.
Indeed. What you see on the picture now on the left is the stereotypical used car salesperson, has a car in a parking lot, and does whatever needed, uses whatever argument needed to really push that car on to the buyer. And this is obviously not the situation that you would like to have in your company. It is not about just pushing electric vehicles towards employees. There is much more collaboration necessary with it. The best example is, well, actually, when defining the electrification strategy, of course, to use already, for instance, a survey to find out what is the current level of awareness on EVs, what are maybe some of the stereotypes, what are the typical disadvantages that my employees actually have for that choice. What could be from there the potential adoption rate because of that survey result? It really sets the baseline. But this is not enough. This is what a lot of companies have already been doing when defining the strategy. The question now is, we're already entered the next stage. Companies do have the experience now with a number of early adopters. It's about using also the experience of those early adopters and communicating about those, as we've seen in the presentation before, really to adjust the message, adjust the communication, maybe also adjust, as Samuel has mentioned, also the setup, the vendors, the services that are being offered, etc., in order really to keep that in a dynamic mode. And not only just say, well, you know, we've defined an EV policy now, we've pushed it into one country, now we go to the next country and we forget about the first one. Very important, as we see, adjusting and continuously actually adjusting that process.
And that's it, by the way. Those were the 7 success factors that we have selected that we wanted to share with you. Now, of course, we couldn't go into all the details. We're happy to do this. If you're interested, please stop by our booth. Let me just recap one more time what those 7 facts are that we have learned in the last years by working with our customers that are important to be considered. First, we spoke about it is important to think about what is the scope of green, right? You decide what you want to do, and then you set your goals for that. Number 2, it's all about control. You need to be able to control complexity. Having a good partner is probably key to making this happen, because it's just so hard to do this all over Europe or maybe worldwide. It's just impossible to be up to date, and that's something that you need to have. Number 3, you need to inquire. Go shopping. Don't be dependent on only one solution. If that solution doesn't work out, it doesn't work out that well. And that's our experience that we have really learned. As an independent advisor, we do see sometimes that customers choose for only one solution to do this. However, we have really seen that it is beneficial to have a choice. It gives you flexibility. It gives you the chance to be able to act when you need. All of this brings us to the change. It's clear. Employees need to rationally understand why there is a change needed, and you need to have the right tools to make them do this, to help them to actually execute that change. It's not just about telling them, this is the new policy, good luck, find the right cars. It's about being guided, being informed, being trained on how this should be done. And this is about the change again. You need to inspire them. They need to understand the bigger picture. The better they understand why they are having to change their cars or their mobility solution, the more easier that your life as a fleet manager is going to be. You will have less complaints, obviously. Then don't forget, you need to adjust. Even though if you have a perfect setup, it may not be the perfect setup for every one of your potential users. Think about what counts for the individual, and then think about what options there are to make it actually happen. And last but not least, it's about collaboration. Don't just try to sell them that thing and think everything is fine. Make sure to get back to them, to listen to them, and to take their feedback not realistic, to take it serious. So, in terms of collaboration, our booth is here. If you have any questions, please stop by. We'd be very happy to meet you, to discuss some of these things in more detail, because obviously we just scratched the surface. There's a lot more and a lot more facts and details about this that we would be happy to share with you.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Thibaut. Thank you for this presentation.